right, Zig coming in on the top. Today on the show, we have Kerry Jones. Kerry is a singer-songwriter, a guitarist, and an artist. Her most recent project, Death Doula, is releasing their debut album, Love Spells. It'll be available on all streaming platforms. Death Doula is a dusty alt-rock band based out of Oregon. They have a very unique atmosphere around their songs, and a very unique origin story, which we get into in the conversation. We're going to listen to a track off the record. This is the track Obstacles off Love Spells by Death Doula. Obstacles is the track, Death Doula, the band, Love Spells, the album. It's available now on all streaming platforms. Go check it out. If you hear anything you like in this conversation, if you can like, rate, review, subscribe to the podcast in any of the podcast platforms, it helps me keep talking to cool guests like Kerry and sharing insight with you. So without further ado, this is my conversation with Kerry Jones of Death Doula. Sick. Very cool. Well, to get into it, you've been doing Death Doula for a while by yourself, correct?
Yeah, so Death Doula has been the moniker for my personal creative musical explorations for like 6 or 7 years. Basically since I had a session with a Death Doula.
So from what I've gleaned from other sources is you hurt your wrist or something skating?
Yeah, I broke it.
You broke it? Okay,
roller
was this
skating.
roller skating? Was it okay. Are you doing roller derby or like just skating? Okay.
No, I was a big like skating head when I grew up in Las Vegas, so when I was in like middle school, I really loved going to the roller rink. Shout out Crystal Palace. And I skated there every Friday, and I love roller skating. And I was kind of passing through Atlanta like November 2016. No, 2017.
Okay.
And went to UGA, so like spent 5.5 years in Athens and had been living in Atlanta a couple of years prior to this, playing in a great band called Richard Gumby with some friends, and dating this magical man, Jeremy, from Low Yo-Yo Records, shout out. And went skating for a friend's birthday, and like, just like coasted right out onto the rink and like picked it up like riding a bike. And then hours later, my first fall of the night, I broke my right wrist.
Oh my God. Ugh.
Yeah, it was epic. And it was like late at night. So like, Atlanta late at night on a weekend.
Yeah.
We went to the emergency room and there were like 3 different gunshot victims.
Oh my God.
Like all around me.
Yeah.
So I ended up hanging out without ice. The ice pack they gave me, like you're supposed to break it, like crack it, and it gets cold. It like wasn't getting cold. They didn't give me pain reliever. Like 6 hours later, the doctor came to see me. I'd been just like kind of laying there, like trying to sleep, but hearing all of these like gunshot victims moaning all around me, and like drug addicts like screaming. It was so intense.
Yeah.
And my morphine lady arrived like right as the doctor arrived. So it was like, well, I could have like really enjoyed some morphine for the last 6 hours, but then he just, injected like numbing into my wrist, and like I didn't need the morphine anymore. So it wasn't a very fun night.
That sounds awful. That's the worst time to get like to have to do that too, in the middle of the night. Like, and when you come in and you see gunshot victims, you're doing the math. You're like, I'm gonna be here forever.
Totally.
I'm relatively okay. Like,
yeah, compared to these folks.
Oh my God, that sucks. Like that's
yeah. It did. It sucked. And then like the recovery super sucked because I'm right-handed and I'm a guitar player and a chef. So I couldn't do anything that I was used to doing and that I loved to do and needed to do. And my friend Ray had met with a Death Doula when she broke her leg. And Ray and I were chatting, and it was like, you should chat with this death doula that I chatted with. I was like, dude, sure, I'm really struggling here. And the concept of a death doula is certainly like to guide you through your own death, or if you have like terminal cancer or something, or like you through the death of a loved one. But it can be a little bit more abstract than that as well. Like it can be guiding you through the loss of a job, or the loss of a long-term relationship, or the loss of autonomy in any way. And so it was really helpful because I was experiencing, I couldn't work and I couldn't kind of make my creative projects. And I just felt like a bump on a log and like could barely open a can of beans. So it was really helpful. It was an interesting session. It was long distance.
Okay.
And we kind of like talked about the situation that I was in and how I was feeling. And then we got off the phone and she did like her long distance energy work on me. And it was in that time that I kind of got the download that I don't need to play guitar. I can, but when my wrist heals, or like, it's available to me when I can. But that what I really have to do and what I really am on this planet to do is to sing and to use my voice. And I still had access to that, even though my wrist was broken. So it was a bit of like a permission to just really go all in vocally and maybe use my voice in ways I hadn't thought to before, like with effects. And I just really started doing experiments with like just a really, basic DAW and uploading things to Bandcamp at that point. But that was how the project kind of started. I'd been in other bands and had different like things going on before this, but that was like the origin story of Death Doula.
I mean, looking into it, I was like, Death Doula, that's a cool name. Just, by itself, not knowing that the profession of it existed, you know what I mean? And then after digging into you guys, I'm like, wow, that's pretty fascinating. Like, because that's a very vulnerable time for anybody in a lot of situations. And like, does the idea of a death doula come from like a certain like practice of sorts? Like, does it come from a certain like kind of religious outlook? Because I like, that seems like, a lot of times people kind of fall into whatever their religion may be that kind of guide them in that sense. So is it like a death doula kind of like a come from anything like that, or is it just kind of a?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's maybe like more like pagan, like witch, like caretaker, like kind of going back to the way that humanity has maybe like leaned since things were simpler. And kind of more tapped in. And, like, I don't know if you know anything about like the red tent rituals, but apparently like when women have their monthly bleed, they like, historically they would go into a tent together and kind of all bleed together so that they were understanding one another and allowing one another to like be wherever they were. But there were also these caretakers, these female caretakers that would be there that weren't bleeding right then. And I think that those women in a way we're like doula-ing the menses process. It's like there's always been a doula. There's obviously birth doulas. I feel like there's always been a doula for like kind of the major hormonal or spiritual transitions in life. And I think it kind of transcends religion. I don't think that, God really is necessarily playing a role, whatever your God is, right? Whatever you believe, whatever religion you subscribe to, which I sort of don't really subscribe to any religion, but I'm spiritual. And I feel that the process of being a doula can be just like an incredibly like helpful, selfless, connected guide.
Right. No, definitely that like of service, in especially for anyone going through something like a great loss like that. I can imagine if you're a person that can kind of endure that type of pain, or seeing someone go through that pain and help guide them through that, that's a really powerful thing.
I agree. Yeah. And who knows like what exactly she was doing, to me or for me in that long distance kind of container that we were creating. But whatever came through for me and however it came through, it felt like an opening. And like I said, giving permission to like embark on this kind of more voice driven journey. So that's what I did.
Yeah. As someone who plays guitar as well, so much of like your self-value in a way you put on your creative outlet and whatever you choose that to be. And I guess in our case, it's guitars, you know what I mean? Like so much of your character, who you are, is kind of this thing you do. And like, I think that's really much really determined through how our society works in a way. Like I can recall in like early high school trying to figure out, well, I don't have a thing. What do I do? You know what I mean? Like trying to figure this thing out. And like, so that like to be kind of given permission to, after you've like kind of established, this is what I do, this is who I am. And other people recognize that like, you're the guitar player, sick. You know what I mean? Like once you kind of like accept that I can change that perception of people and like, or to be told you can, even if it was not directly, that's a really like, I can see how that's a really powerful moment.
Yeah, totally. I definitely identified as a guitar player, and had done that like in Richard Gumby. I just was kind of brought on to just play guitar. I was the only girl in the band, and then I was playing sort of like addendum to lead. It was like Scott and I kind of like traded back and forth who was kind of doing like chord stuff and who was doing like lead lines, and it was really fun. I didn't sing in that band, at least in the beginning. I kind of like brought me in a little bit in that way because Scott wanted that. But yeah, I feel like identifying as a singer is something that kind of found me in a slow and steady way. Like when I was a little girl, I remember being so moved by music, moved to tears, and always wanting to be singing in the car and singing in my room at home, and knew all the words to all my favorite songs, and would just make like compilation after compilation on cassette tapes from the radio of my favorite songs, and then like listen back to those and like learn all the words and like all the melodies. And it came so easily to me. It wasn't like taking much study. It was just like an obsession. And I realized that I could sing all the songs the way that the singers did, but I still kind of didn't get that like everyone couldn't do that. And that there was something that I had that was maybe like unique and special. And I don't know, I was just reading the Kathleen Hanna book. I was on vacation last week and was so moved by her experience of coming to like the knowledge that she was a singer. It finds everyone differently. And I think like, sure, you can identify as doing X, Y, or Z. But when you come to the place where you are so innately connected to your own body and your own ability, just like what you have just sitting there being you, like, I don't need this additional instrument to kind of be there with me, like a guitar or whatever. Like it's just already in me and it's what I was born with. And then coming into like the experience of how do I use it and how do I perform and like where do I let it take me. It was so inspiring and interesting to read her experience of how that happened for her, and it really made me kind of reconnect to like how that happened for me. And this Death Doula session was definitely kind of part of that, at least like a layer of the journey, right? Like It uncovered another kind of like level in the game.
Like, and that's a really, well, one, Kathleen, her story is incredible, and like what an inspiring figure, you know what I mean? Like
totally.
So like because for me the vocal journey was a much more like difficult, more arduous process, I would say, than like playing guitar in a way, because like when you play guitar, it's like very, okay, that's a G note. I know it's a G note. Why? Because I tuned it and I'm playing the G note, And then with your voice, it's kind of like, did I do it? I don't know. I gotta listen back. Hold on. think I did. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, all those semitones that don't
Yeah.
exist on like a
gridded
fretted
instrument. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the idea of what a good voice is very vague, but like also very like kind of, we have there's this incredible and popular TV show called American Idol, which tells you what a good voice is. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, or The Voice.
or The Voice.
Which was
Yeah,
always my favorite.
yeah. But there's this very kind of like personified version of what a good voice is, and I found it so hard to like to hone that into an acceptable thing, you know. So like I relate to, I wish I related more to like just believing in it, like how you did at the rip. Like that's a really cool like foundation, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I guess to kind of bounce back with guitar playing, like when did you start, if you're like kind of listening to stuff and picking up on vocals as a kid, when did like the guitar, when did you decide to like try to make that emotive expression as well?
Yeah. My dad had played guitar in college. He went to like conservatory, and used a little like footstool and like played classical.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And he has and had then when I was little, like a pretty keen understanding of theory. But he was kind of doing his like I work for the government and like not really playing guitar era when I was young. Now he's in like 3 bands.
That's awesome.
And like totally like his whole life is centered around playing, which is amazing. And he lives on the coast, Oregon coast, and I live in Portland, Oregon. So I get to go visit him and my stepmom Mary several times a year, and it's always so fun. I get to go to a lot of his gigs actually, and he's been to a few of our gigs now. Yeah, so my first instrument that I like dabbled in is keyboard actually. But the way that he was teaching me, I kind of wasn't that receptive. I was super young. I was like 5 or 6. And so I didn't really take to it. But I've always had a respect for the keyboard because you can just see everything. You don't have to crane your neck.
Yeah.
There's no curling or guessing. It's a very symmetrical body experience to play, which obviously none of those things are in place with guitar. It's like completely asymmetrical. It really can like mess your spine up, like definitely like have neck and spine issues already from like different things that have happened in my life. So yeah, it's like, wow, there it is. It's all laid out in a flat line, and anything you kind of do can sound cool. And like, if there's dissonance, you can resolve, and it's just all right there. I don't know, maybe him taking me to this place of like, you're learning the keyboard now at such a young age, like kind of instilled a little bit of, reverence in me for the instrument. And then in middle school, I played the trumpet, which is so dorky. But God, it was so loud, and practicing was like so vulnerable because like the whole block could hear whatever I was playing.
Right.
It's not like a flute. I mean, it's really out there. You can't just like practice unamplified, in your bedroom like you can with guitar. It's like if you are playing trumpet, it can be heard for hundreds of feet. So that was a time. I was always just kind of like mid at trumpet. Like I didn't care that much, and I wasn't that turned on by the instrument, or honestly by the stuff we were learning to play, or by my instructor. Shout out Scott Kissel. And yeah, and then in high school, I want to say either junior or senior year, I think senior year, we were offered this possibility of doing like independent study. And I was like, okay, I'm going to learn guitar. I'm going to take like lessons as like part of my high school curriculum.
That's
outside of school though.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, you like prove what you've learned with a performance. Right. So, I'd been involved in like musicals and straight plays, since being young. So I'd performed in front of people already, but I'd never performed musically and had never performed like on my own. Like, so it was kind of a big deal. I totally remember the concert, like, my performance, like, very clearly. But the lessons that I took, honestly, were kind of bullshit. Basically, all we did was I went in to this guy who was like Neil Young, like vibes. And I was like, I want to learn this Tom Petty song. And he was like, okay, cool. And he would like listen to it and basically like give me like just easy tab or whatever, like charts. And I never learned theory. I never learned like anything about, the kind of like core information about how this instrument works and why it works the way it does and like what you need to know about it and how to bond with it and how to care for it. Like, didn't learn how to string it, didn't learn how to tune it. I mean, like none of the basics were involved and certainly no theory. It was just kind of like getting the very baseline thing accomplished of like, I will be able to perform several songs at the end of this semester, to like prove that I learned something. Right. So that was my like educational journey on guitar. Not very,
thorough.
Not very thorough and not very rewarding.
Yeah.
So I did do my performance and I did get credit and I like played my songs great. These were not originals at that time. These were like the covers that I was learning in my lessons. But from there, I just went off to college and ended up meeting somebody in my art classes who wanted to form a band. And I was like, cool. Yeah, I have a guitar, and we just started writing parts together. Like she would maybe give me a song that she'd already kind of developed, like the main chord progression. And it just came so easy to me to write by ear. I could certainly not tell you like what key the songs were in or like time signature. I could totally like, count that out. Like certain things came naturally to me, like comprehension wise, but yeah, it was always just really by ear. So I basically am an outsider artist. I don't really have like a formal training in any way. Definitely not vocally, definitely not on guitar. I mean, a little bit on trumpet, but like, I don't play the trumpet anymore. So I feel like everything just kind of went over my head in terms of like what I maybe should have learned. And I just kind of got comfortable playing the instrument. Like playing, learning these covers and playing them to the point that I could play them pretty well and having a good sense of timing and when to move to the next chord and, how to get my fingers to form all these different shapes and like what kind of pick I like and all these things. And then it just kind of has developed over the years a little bit more personally. And at this point, I kind of still write the same way I did in that very first band.
What was that first band?
That band was called Who is Myrtle Malloy? This was like a math rock band in Athens, Georgia in like 2004, 5. Yeah.
Like, I think, so it's interesting, like, because I teach a fair amount of guitar lessons and I try to dump the theory out while teaching the bit. Because like, there's something that's, for students, I think, rewarding to be like, I want to do that thing. Can you teach me that thing? I'm like, yeah. All right, that thing's a minor pentatonic scale, and if you learn this, and then we're going to learn that and this at the same time. I try to explain that, but I always find like that the kind of theory stuff kind of floats, it dissipates right away, and then the kind of just practice of learning the thing, the excitement of getting that thing out from the radio, out of your hands, is another level. But also, I think back to, because I took a few lessons when I started, and I watch a ton of DVDs of lessons and stuff. I'm trying to absorb a bunch of things, and to me, anyone that kind of explains the thing resonates way more. You know what I mean? So I can see like kind of how it'd be like not as rewarding to just like kind of, yeah, here's how you play like Mary Jane's Last Dance or whatever Tom Petty it was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like, what key is that in? It's a good question.
Yeah. Yeah, like I guess kind of the like how and why didn't really come in. It was just kind of like the what,
Yeah. especially if you're trying to make it your own thing, the how and why is like crucial, you know?
Yeah.
Because how do I make this my own? Like, but I find like if you keep doing it too, you kind of like will, like how you just stated, you find your own way through it. So after doing a math rock band and like with the other group you mentioned,
Richard Gumby, yeah.
Richard Gumby, was that like, so at that time when you're trading leads and like, because like I think to be able to sing and play and to be able to like do any type of musical, like you get like player's theory kind of in a way, where you like, you know what I mean? You get that like kind of knowledge of like how you said, I know when the chords are going to change. I know when I'm supposed to do the thing. That I don't think you get that any other way other than like playing. You know, you can learn how to count real well and play to a click, but when you're playing to a drummer that speeds up and slows down, you know what I mean? Like you got to have that like natural, like kind of, here we go, you know, thing. And like that only comes from playing. So like leaving a math rock type of group, like to another group where you're kind of playing pseudo leads or like you're like kind of ambidextrous and rhythm and lead, like, was it?
Well, there was actually a band in between those two.
Okay. What was it? Was
called
that
Phoenicians?
Phoenicians? That's a goodie.
Yeah. Yeah. And we put out a little recording. So like Who is Myrtle Malloy recorded something with the guys at EP1, this math rock band we were buddies with called Cinemechanica.
That's incredible too. Oh my God. That's the most math rock
guys
band.
Yeah, totally. Most of those guys now do this thing where they like play along with some video game.
Whoa.
While I think while my buddy Jace like plays the game, wins the game in like one run. Like it's like a big thing and they like tour the world. It's insane. I forget what the game is. I want to say it's Zelda, but that might be wrong. Yeah, so those guys had this like sick property out in the country outside Athens, Georgia, and like an amazing studio. So we recorded there with our buddies, and then like Erica's dog bit my friend's eye, and we like broke up, and we never put the record out. So that was really stupid.
That's insane. Holy shit.
That was really stupid. We lived together in this like crazy party house in Athens, and we had like multiple dogs and multiple cats and lots of friends coming and going, and it was good times. But yeah, then like years later, I was living in New York at like a kind of a long distance project with a friend I think she was in Atlanta most of the time, which was Phoenicians. So in that band, I played guitar and sang, and she played like sort of synth and sometimes beats. She didn't really play an instrument. She was just like teaching herself as she went kind of thing. So it had a very outsider sound, which I really loved. And we recorded on a 4-track with some friends, Will Donaldson and John Spiegel, shout out, in Athens one summer, and put out like a little EP. And then I was still in New York for a while, you know, and then like moved down to Atlanta, but was playing in Richard Gumby based in Athens. So I've had like a long correspondence with Athens and music. It's such a great music town, and I have so many people there. And in Atlanta, they're only like an hour apart, so it's kind of like one and the same, you know? Yeah, so kind of like been doing different projects over the years, but kind of always just wrote the same way, which is just kind of the way I write, you know, just very by ear.
Gotcha. So with that middle band, was that really when you were trying vocally to like kind of expand in that way, since you were singing in that project?
Well, I was singing in Who is Myrtle Malloy, and so was Erica.
Okay.
I was singing in Phoenicians as really the only singer. There was sometimes when my bandmate did a little bit of like, you know, backing vocals.
So in
harmonies.
Phoenicians, were you taking like kind of the lead as far as like learning how to adapt like how you would write guitar parts and kind of pair that vocally?
Yeah, I mean, I was doing that in the first band as well.
Okay.
But really, like, mostly how it started was like Erica had some songs, and then she would like bring them to me, and I would like write parts to that, you know, those existing parts that she had, and then maybe like then we started writing together, and we were doing some like call and response vocally and also with guitars. We didn't have a bass player in that band. So she was playing like an SG and I was playing like a Gibson ES-135, which is like a semi-hollow body.
Yeah.
And so we had like very different guitar sounds, and she would maybe play a little bit more like bassy parts and had like thicker gauge strings. And I was playing like maybe more like thwacky, twangy parts. And so we had this really interesting like sonic melding happening with our guitars, and then no bass. And then on drums, we actually had my dear friend Phil Haran from the band Maserati. He had like stopped playing with them and started playing with us. And then Mike from Cinemechanica started playing with Maserati, and I think he maybe still does, but don't quote me on that. But I don't even know if Maserati's still doing Maserati, but last I heard they were. Yeah, and then in Phoenicians, like, I guess it was, I've been writing songs in between Malloy and Phoenicians years, and also learning covers still, How does Neil Young do that? Like, just always wanting to know kind of what other people are doing in terms of chord progressions, and how it's working for them and why, and how often they're using dissonance. A lot of music is just happy sounding. And I didn't really ever resonate with that. Like, sure, okay, yes, I like Tom Petty, but I didn't like the Tom Petty stuff like Louisiana Rain as much as I liked the Tom Petty stuff like you said, Mary Jane's Last Dance, or like the stuff on You're Gonna Get It, like these really like melancholic chord progressions. Like that's the stuff that I always liked more. So how do they make it sound like that? What are they doing exactly? Just like exploring what other people have done and learning from that. Never wanting to do what they did, but almost wanting to not do what they did, but to take something from it and to understand it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's like you gotta know the rules to break them type of thing.
Yeah,
you gotta like.
Yeah, and I was in art school. I was literally learning about fine art and then the history of fine art. Like you have to take so many art history courses, and so that mentality was drilled into me. Like you can't break the rules until you learn them. Like you have to go to 4 different art history classes every year, 2 per semester, and learn from the greats so that as you're making your body of fine art, you can be informed, and know what you're doing, and like maybe subvert some of these like classical rules, but like only because you know that they exist.
And when you were studying art, were you did you paint, like, or do you have like another like a medium, or were you just studying the history, like art history?
Yeah, so my first art form was photography.
Okay.
In high school, I won an award. There's this photographer named Sam Abel who shoots for National Geographic.
Yeah.
And he awarded me this like nationwide award from a photo that I took. And I was, in photo classes. That was like the only art form that I was really exploring other than music in high school. And then, got into UGA, like under the guise of like, I was going to be studying photography, and did for the first year or so, maybe a year and a half. Really love being in the dark room, love the magic of the chemicals. And it feels very like alchemy and potions. And I love all of that. But I felt like hemmed in by the fact that photography could only be showing something that was really happening. Like you can't take a photo of a memory or a dream or like an imagination, like you can take a photo of something that's real and tangible. And that felt like, okay, like that's less interesting to me. So then I started doing painting and drawing. And that's where I met Erica. She was in that program, and that's how we started doing the band together. But yeah, then I was integrating so much fabric and mixed medium into my paintings and drawings that a professor took me aside and was like, do you know there's a fabric design program here? And I was like, no, I don't. But I want to. And so I started at that point, several years into college, I changed my major a second time to a third major, which was fabric design. And that program is a certain length of time. You can't really hasten the process. So it took me 5.5 years to graduate with a Bachelor of Fine Arts, but I ended up like really loving the fabric program and just immersing myself in that entirely. So I actually did some work that was like incorporating sound art and sound design into some of my fabric sculptures. It was always just
that sounds
exploration.
incredible. Yeah, I was so I had two questions on that. Was that like, were you working like with looms or anything like that?
Oh my God. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a room of just the whole room was filled with Dobby looms.
Oh
These are
wow.
like
Yeah.
old, like beautiful relics. And Professor had a lot of yarns, that before, like from the 70s, 80s, 90s, like so many beautiful time capsules that we could use, So like, they just don't make stuff like they used to. So if you're like buying new yarn, it's not the same as using like a huge skein of yarn, that's like 20 or 30 years old and has been like protected and kept well. And so those early weavings on those looms, I just like treasure those because that time period was so special for me. I was also, I was really like embarking on like sound art kind of at that time while I was getting into fabric and like listening to like insane noise bands like lightning bolts. And then also
sick.
like listening to like the birthday party, and just like kind of
Yeah.
expanding from like math rock and like the world that I'd kind of been in. I wasn't in that band anymore. I was getting more into like, actually it was like making friends with people in the fabric program. And like one of those friends was who I was later in the band Phoenicians with. So it was just kind of like expanding and growing in a very like organic way.
I guess it's maybe, what do you find there's a through line between working with like a physical medium like fabric and a non-physical medium like sound?
Yeah, I do. But for me, it's so personal. I don't know that I could say that it's going to be like that for everyone. I mean, it
Yeah.
just happens that way. Although when I think about like some of my early, we'd get assignments and sometimes I could use whatever material I wanted. And sometimes I was using like tape, like pulling out the tape from a cassette or like pulling out the tape from a VHS and like using that tape as like my yarn, if you will, and also like screen printing a lot of like images of like sound, if that makes sense. Like,
no.
maybe like, a boombox, like, or having like speakers. Like, it was always just kind of, there was like a fusion happening of like media, like multimedia with fabric. Like, it all just was kind of one in this very like synesthesic way, but like I don't know that I can say that that's like an absolute truth. That was just how it was for me.
Right. Well, I mean, like I think like with having that many like different like one interest and like capability to like kind of express yourself in all these different ways, that it's all coming from you. So there's got to be kind of like a through line of how like you kind of like conceptually like, all right, with this is how I'm going to do that. You know what I mean? Like to express yourself in all these different mediums and like just to be fascinated by all these different mediums. I think like there's the through line would have to be, it can only be how you would interpret it, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
But that's super cool. Like, and I find that super fascinating to like have like the ability, I can talk today, the ability to engage in all these platforms, all these like different outlets and like learn how to be you through them. Like that's really inspiring.
Yes. Cool. Thank you. Yeah, it was inspiring for me too. And I think it's why like I stuck with those two things for so long, and they kind of like existed like in tandem for so long, and they're both very much a part of my life today. Even I don't have a loom anymore, but I wrote a song called Loom, and I feel like the concept of a loom is just so like potent for me, like the sort of metaphor, of what looms do, and kind of just like whatever I learned while I was in the fabric program, like literally making fabric, which we all wear and use all day, every day. You know, I'm sleeping in a bed and it has textiles on it, and my ground has textiles on it, and my body has textiles on it. Like they're so integrated and interwoven, pun intended, into like our daily lives. And it can be intentional, you know, just like sound is. Like sound can be intentional. Like I'm choosing the words that I'm saying very specifically, and I'm choosing like how I use my voice very specifically, and that's my prerogative, you know. It can be like that. It can be like art is life if you want it to be, you know.
Yeah. I guess like what in the fabric world of things, like as far as like okay, like this because I have no clue, but it has to exist. So like groups like the Birthday Party, right? Or just like these kind of outside bands, like is there equivalent to that in like the kind of fabric world of things? You know what I'm saying? Like there's got to be like an outside artist that like is badass. Like the Lydia Lunch of the fabric world. Like
yeah, I mean there's some like natural dye artists who I was really getting into when I was in the program, who, you know, were maybe making books or maybe having like workshops or whatever, using botanicals as the dye or using botanicals as like a printing element. Yeah. And there's like artists that I was like going to their shows who are maybe using fabrics in like a kind of a installation art, like a whole world, a whole little moment, a whole little room or space that you're like thrust into. And like the show is not just like a piece on the wall. The show is you're like in this room, in this container, in this vessel that they've created for you. They've created every aspect of what's going on the desk and on the bed and in the ceiling, in the, you know, corner of the ceiling. And it's this like whole world, and maybe like kind of all of it is fabric, or like most of it is, you know, maybe sometimes the fabric is looking like not fabric. Or maybe sometimes you're very clear it's like a textile, but like kind of playing with like hard, soft, like what is art? Like I found all of these kinds of shows really inspiring.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. Like, well, okay, so I guess to kind of bounce ahead. So in Death Doula now, like now that it's more than just kind of like a practice for you to get kind of, or not a practice for you, a mode of expression for you to like learn to like work your voice in a different way, and not just a personal project. It's become this band. How the band came together seems just as spontaneous as like how I guess Death Doula to you became like a new mode of expression. Did you like? I hope I don't get. It's Kyle, right? Who you guys started?
Yeah.
Okay. When you and Kyle started working together, which was kind of like that was just like a per circumstance thing. Like you guys just met each other, right? And then started jamming.
Kind of.
Okay. All right.
I wouldn't say jamming. I have such a funny connotation with, hey, you want to jam? But kind of, yeah. So I had been playing with some folks in town, kind of trying to find the right like group of musicians to, you know, play with. I'd put out a little EP with a friend under the name Death Doula, a couple friends. And I was looking for like, you know, a forever band really. And I had some cats I was playing with. It was feeling pretty good. And then I went out to the coast to visit my parents, and I met Kyle. And there's a long story there, but the like, you know, kind of core answer to your question is that on New Year's Eve, he invited me to come over and collaborate with him at his little home studio. I was planning on being back in Portland for New Year's Eve, but my housemates here had COVID, so I didn't really want to come back to the house.
Fair.
So I stayed out there and went over to his house, and he had several beats that he played for me. And I chose one that I really loved. And I actually had these lyrics written about his friends who I'd had a crush on. And just literally did one take, Dave. Disembark was one take. It was an improvisation over his beat, and that was like Disembark is like ABA.
Yeah.
Like that was the A and the B. So like the whole song was written, just I listened to his beat like one time through, then I like sat on his bed and he gave me the mic and I just improvised the A and B of Disembark, and then we just kind of like hung out and like it was a date. It was beautiful. It was
That's
such a
awesome.
lovely
Yeah.
like special night. And we basically fell in love that night, and like the fireworks went off and I was still there, and we hung out the next day, and he basically came to visit me in Portland 4 days later and then moved to Portland like within January, like within that first month. And then he was then part of the group, right? So then like he and I were collaborating with some of these other people that I had been, and then there was some lineup turnover. And then we were like playing with this guy for a while, and it was like the vibe wasn't very good, but God, it's so hard to find like good collaborators. Oh my God. It's like they say like good help is hard to find. It's like, dude, good bandmates are hard to find.
That's true. I agree with that.
No drama, but
Yeah.
also like on your same level of like skill and talent and interest and dedication and time that they have available,
Yeah.
and it's really been like truly a lifelong journey. I can't tell you how many people I've played with, people we've talked about in this conversation, that like want it less than I do and like have less time that they're willing to devote, and like we end up not playing together anymore because of that. It's basically everyone that I've ever played with. But yeah, we ended up finding Keith like truly through Craigslist, and Adam as well.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
Craigslist
like
pulling through. Oh my God.
Craigslist coming hard. Yeah, I don't know how we got so lucky with that, but I mean, believe me, it's like hundreds of people I've had to sift through to find those two, but Adam, Adam's on the record. He's no longer playing with us. Sadly, we're currently looking for a drummer to replace Adam. It's been a long journey. Adam is classically trained, wonderful human being, very inventive, creative drummer, as I'm sure you're aware from listening to the songs. And his shoes have not been easy to fill. He basically stepped down to focus on his young child, who's having some extra needs. So yeah, it's been a hard couple months, to like release an album and be kind of like
stepping
in
back.
transition mode. Yeah. It's not, we're playing with someone now, and
so I was gonna say, like, listening to this record, like, because I know there was a kind of back and forth when we had an initial interview scheduled, and like the music wasn't out yet, or Howard didn't have it to send over. So I was like, oh, let's wait till we can hear it, because I like to listen to the music before like reading anything about the people I'm going to talk to, at least with Howard. And like after talking with you and like hearing like all these different modes of expression, like sonically this record is really like solid. Like every tune is in this atmosphere that is uniquely you guys, and like the play with outside sound, and like and it's not like it's just like spacey music, because some of the tunes are like fast tempo driving shit, and it's just no matter what, there's like this like kind of realm, space, atmosphere that you guys put in. It's amazing how it transitions from the first song to the last. Like, I don't think it's intentional. I think it's just how you guys sound together as a group. And it's really well done, and it makes it uniquely you guys sound, and it's really like endearing, and like kind of it sinks you in. You're like, okay, this is sick. All right, you know what I mean? Like, I'm in. And then by the time you're out, you're like, oh, the record's over. But after talking with you and kind of getting this like the background of like with like working with fabrics and all these different, it makes sense that you would kind of weave these textures together in a way that kind of makes that encompassing like exhibit.
I love that. Thank you for saying that. That's deep for me. Yeah, exactly. It's like those installation art like containers that I was talking about,
this record is one. Like,
yeah,
I was talking with my girlfriend about it
the
today.
Ceiling.
And like we were talking, I was showing her like the record as I was, getting ready to drive out here and talk with you. Like, I was like, it's like all one thing. It's wild. Like,
that's really cool. Yeah, I mean, what's funny is like, I don't know. Of course, I can't hear it the way you can. Like it's so impossible to step back from your art and really see it objectively.
Yeah.
But like, it feels like it's one thing. But one thing that we've really like been thinking about or just like noticing is like, there's so much diversity. There's so much dynamics. There's songs that are so up tempo and then songs that are so down tempo. There's songs that are so grungy and like slimy and murky. And there's songs that are sort of more like floating or flying. It's like, it really is kind of all over the map. And
it is.
We never thought like we need to make a like, concise like record that really, feels like one mood. Like we never thought about an end goal really. We were just writing songs and just feeling free inside the creative process. But when we were listening to all the songs and kind of figuring out like an order that we thought made sense, I was just really struck by how different every song is. But it's really cool to hear that you see it as like one thing, because that's also kind of important,
Well, thanks. Like it's not like I'm saying, it's not like every song sounds like one song. It's because like I was just before we call it, I was listening to Dirty Shirt again. Like that sounds like a Nirvana track. You know what I mean? Like these are all like I could tell that are like individual like the songs that came up whatever you guys are working on in the moment. It's just this not weird. I was gonna say weird, but it's this unique atmosphere that is uniquely you guys. That like that makes that kind of cocoon of like this record.
Cool. I love that. Yeah, cocoon.
On Dirty Shirt, can you tell me a little bit about that tune?
Sure. That one came pretty early. I want to say like the first weekend Kyle came to visit me here. So like, the first week of January. We were, collaborating some more during his visit, and I think we wrote Dirty Shirt then. And maybe I think Dirty Shirt is the one that I came up with the guitar part. Was just kind of like screwing around, and he was like, "What is that?" And I was like, "I don't know." And he learned it and started playing it. And then I think I did like a voice memo of him playing it and like sat with that for a little while. And was working on lyrics about him because we were sort of in a long distance relationship for a minute there, like he wasn't living here yet and I wanted him to be, and we were like crazy in love and excited about our project and our relationship. And it was like, I was kind of writing these lyrics about him being away, like when we were together, when the seed of the song originated, which is like the chord progression on guitar, and like then he went away and we kind of had that, and I had the voice memo of it, him playing it, and I was writing these lyrics, and I don't know, it just kind of was like, oh, that goes with that. That's how it works so often with us. I'm always writing poems, and they just live in my phone, in my notes app. And then, when there's a song that's coming about in terms of like a guitar progression, I'm like, what does this need or want? And sometimes I'll maybe write something on the spot, but it's so rare. Honestly, I really like to sit with lyrics and really contemplate and consider the rhyme or the off rhyme, what it's about, what kind of words I want to use, and how I want the song to flow, how I want to tell that story. And I just find that it usually happens like when nothing else is being demanded of me. I'm not being asked to, write a song.
Right.
Like I'm just like sitting and like creating a poem, like sharing a story in my own time. Like there's no expectation or demand. So usually when there's like a guitar thing that we're wanting to match lyrics to and, a vocal melody, I just like kind of improvise over whatever we have with like an existing poem that I have. And that's what happened with Dirty Shirt.
That's cool. Like I find myself using the Notes app and the audio notes, the recorder app like crazy. And
voice memos.
The voice memos, thank you.
Totally.
Like, those are like it's a little thing that everyone just has now, but man, what a useful like advice.
Oh my God, it's everything.
Oh, God.
It's everything. It makes my creative process so much easier. I mean, we're very analog people. We have like a typewriter and a CD player and a turntable and like, you know, like a huge vinyl and CD collection. And we like Kyle bought a briefcase full of like old spy equipment at a yard sale. So we have this little like teeny tape, like digital hand recorder, like Agent Dale Cooper on Twin Peaks, that we like sometimes use for ideas because he doesn't have a smartphone. He's a dumb phone guy right now. But he'll use that like to get something down. But for me, it's really just like my phone's always there. It's so easy. You know, the sound quality is pretty high. And it's a great way to like easily get ideas down.
For sure. And just to run all the nonsense that comes with doing the band bit. You know what I mean? It's kind of it's a necessary evil in that sense.
Yes.
Okay, so I have one more question. And I really appreciate you taking time to chat with me today. And I really enjoyed getting to dive into the record. I get to kind of be starting this new group and this new relationship at the same time. Is there like I guess a work balance, you know what I mean? Or is it like something like, or is it something that like you both kind of just find yourself like just falling into at the moment? Or is there like a specific, okay, we're just hanging out time? Like, is there a work relationship balance?
That's so funny to think about. All I can say is it's very like haphazard and intuitive and passionate and chaotic. We aren't like, I don't know, Kyle's always talking to me about gear that he wants. He's always sending me, links to like YouTube videos of like some guy playing through this like new pedal that come out. We talk about gear a lot. We talk, we watch like videos on YouTube, probably realistically like several nights a week, of like bands performing live, doing like Fender sessions or like Audio Tree or, KEXP, gigs, and then like have like discourse about like what we like that they're doing, what we don't like that they're doing, like how they sound live versus on the record, how we want to sound live versus on the record. Like literally just thinking about our last night. Like we were talking about Spirit of the Beehive. We were talking about ML Book. We were talking about Lady Gaga, like watching all of these people, their music videos, their live performances. Like it's all the time. It never ends. But like it's not because either one of us doesn't have good boundaries or like, is like forcing the other one to kind of be on that tip. It's like we both are just like living for this. Like I said, it's been hard for me to find collaborators that take it as seriously as I do and want it as much as I do. Like I've done a lot of therapy and so has Kyle. And one thing that I know is like relationships often don't work because there's like a difference of interest. Right. So that doesn't have to mean a romantic relationship. That means any relationship. So if there's a difference in interest of how long, how often you want to perform, how often you want to practice, how often you want to put out records, like it's not going to work. You have to kind of be aligned. And I've currently found, at least with Keith and Kyle, two people that are like living for this. And they love talking about gear and they love writing songs and they love going to shows and they love talking about, having like a discourse about like our modern contemporaries, and also like folks from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. It's like, this is just us being us. And Kyle and I have a really easy time jiving, in our romantic relationship because we're both kind of always thinking creatively also. So it's like probably not for everyone, the kind of thing that we have. Cause, you know, there isn't really like a work-life balance per se, because like work feels like life and life feels like work. Like the art is our life. And like, so there isn't like I mean, sure, we watch movies, you know, and talk about the film. We go out to dinner, but like usually like at some point in any conversation, like our band, our music, our gear, our vision comes up, and we end up, you know, talking about that. It's all kind of through that lens.
That's beautiful. I think that's so cool. That's really awesome. And I'm really happy for you guys. That's like to find like someone that you can share that obsessive, like just obsessiveness with. And like, that is really special. That's awesome.
It is really special. Thank you. Yeah. We're both very happy in our current lives and just want to do it like this for a long, long time.
What are we looking at next? As far as Death Doula? So
yeah, let's go there.
Let's go there. What do we got next for Death Doula?
Yeah, so this record comes out October 10th. It's called Love Spells. We have actual CDs because it's like that. And obviously, you know, you can listen on Spotify and Bandcamp. And doing a couple shows, would love to do more shows. Hit us up at deathdoulaband@gmail.com if you want to set something up together. We'd love to come to your town. But yeah, we're already working on like a bunch of seeds of new songs. We have this shared love of trip hop, and we're kind of doing a couple songs that have like beats involved. Of course, we also want to have a live drummer because there's just nothing sexier or hotter or tighter or more engaging to watch than a live drummer. And even if we have beats, you know, that are like being triggered from some piece of gear or performed live, we still want to have a live drummer. So yeah, just like kind of seeing how the sound of the band like morphs for the second album, and just starting to write new stuff, but in a very like organic way, as always. You know, we have no like deadlines on ourselves or even really timelines in mind. We're just flowing with it.
Well, I really appreciate you taking time to chat with me. And like I was saying, I really loved getting to dive into the record, and I'm excited to hear what comes next.
Thank you. Yeah, awesome. I really appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thanks for listening, and thanks for chatting, Dave.
Yo, Spike Spiegel here. You just listened to Zig at the Gig podcast. Keep riding the bebop. See you, Space Cowboy. Bang.